podcast. This is my guest speaker, Sara Jean. So, we have been doing Bridles and Bibles for some time now. It's been about 2 or 3 years, and I have really been into the bridle horse stuff. I went to college with Wade Black over at TVCC, and he always talked about the La Quinta Fresnel, and I've gotten to do it a couple times with a couple different horses. And for me, I feel like it really has a great way of explaining relationship with Jesus as you start out. And that's kind of what Bridles and Bibles is focused on. And having you here today is super cool because I know all of your stuff is really centered towards the bridle horse, yes?
Yes, it is.
So my first question is, how has horsemanship changed your relationship with Jesus?
So I think horsemanship has changed my relationship with Jesus in just the aspect that God has really utilized horses in my training sessions to speak to me in a more clear manner. I mean, it's pretty amazing how many times I go out and I work with a horse and I'm having these thoughts of, don't you just get it? Don't you just, can't you just understand what I'm trying to tell you here? And there's so many times that I look back on my training sessions and I'm like, oh my gosh, that pertains to exactly what is happening in my life right now. Like, for example, when I first started Reba, my road mare, under saddle and got her, after I got her halter broke and everything, she had the most horrendous setting back problem. I mean, I never had a horse set back so much and so hard. I mean, the wind would change direction and that horse would set back. And Reba and I have a lot of the same kind of personality traits. We're both stubborn, independent, strong-willed, and a little anxious at times. And so when I was trying to work through the setting back problem, like every single trick that I tried, it would not work. I tried the belly ropes, I tried butt ropes, I tried hobbles, I tried chiropractic work. I took her to a vet to see if she was in any pain, tried different halters. I was asking advice from anyone and everyone that had any snippet of advice to give me because I'd never had a horse that was so just adamant on setting back at every single opportunity. And then one day when Jeff and I were at cow camp, she was tied to a post, hard tied to a stout post, obviously, and she reached down to try to grab some grass. And when she did that, the lead rope went up and over her pole. And when she put her head up, of course, it was an excuse to set back. She sat back really hard, but because the lead rope was up over her pole on the off side, it caused her to actually flip over and get cast against the fence. And so once she, stopped fighting and everything like that, I walked over and I petted her and I said, hey, it's okay. We're going to be okay. Calm down. And I untied her and I let her up. And I just sat there thinking, I'm like, horse, if you would have just listened to my guidance, if you would have just followed my lead and trusted me, you would have never had to get yourself in this situation. And since then, Reba has not set back since. But looking back on, scenarios like that, I can't tell you how many times God has probably said the exact same thing to me, going, Sara Jean, you probably wouldn't be in this situation if you weren't so stubborn and determined to do it on your own. You got yourself in a bad place because you didn't listen to me. You didn't follow my guidance and you didn't trust me to show you the way. And there's so many times that I'm training horses, you go to catch a horse in the round pen and they're just running nonstop and they won't slow down and they're just all up in their mind and anxious and they're looking for, what should I do next? Do I need to run faster? Do I need to turn? Do I need to do this? And you're like, little sister, just stop and look to me for guidance and I can tell you what you need to do. And it's always like, as soon as I have thoughts like that when it comes to horses, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what's happening in my life right now. God is telling me, sister, stop and look to me for guidance. Like, look, if you just stop and listen to what I have to say, I can show you what is laid out for you. And so I think that it's really changed my horsemanship, or it's affected my relationship with Jesus, because he utilizes my passion to speak to me in relevant ways and things that's going on in my life, because horses read off of people. And so I think God is utilizing the horses, and they behave in certain ways that day because of what I'm feeling in my heart, and so they react accordingly. to that, and that's God's way of utilizing horses to speak to me.
I have the same relationship, same thing. I actually have a little blue roan mare out there who's Hancock. Sounds exactly like Reba. I've done that so many times. I've been in that situation where I'm like fighting with this horse, and I'm like, "Would you just pay attention for 5 seconds? Like, just look to me. I'll teach you everything you need to know." And then I'm like, "Oh, God does that with me," and I am way too stubborn to hear him most of the time.
Yep. Yep. So yeah, I'm glad that God has definitely utilized horses in a way to speak to me, because sometimes I'm too stubborn to listen.
It's the only way I ever like figured out how to have a relationship with him. Like I grew up as a Christian,
Yeah.
but I didn't understand relationship with Christ until I started training horses. And then for me, I was like, it's
Yeah.
the way. So that leads us to the next question. How has Jesus changed your relationship then with horsemanship and horses?
He definitely has changed relationship with horses in a way of understanding how a relationship with your horses should be. You know, you should be kind, you should be forgiving, you should be understanding, all of those things. And I look at, God looks at me and forgives me for the mistakes that I have made. And he goes, hey, you've made these mistakes, but here's the clear path of what we need to do next. And this is where we need to go. And so that's kind of the relationship that I look for with my horses. Having kind of that same relationship with horses. And as you're kind of starting out and working with horses when they're green and starting them under saddle, understanding that, you need to be forgiving, you need to be kind, you need to guide them and show them the way, show them what is right, show them what is wrong and what to do and not to do. But as the horse becomes more knowledgeable and more experienced in their training, it's the same, you start to get expectations of that horse and more demands of that horse, because now they do know how to act and how to behave. And so now you have expectations, and it's the same as us being followers in Christ. The more knowledge and the more close we become to God and more knowledge of his word that we obtain, we have expectations as followers of Christ, to be kind, to be understanding, to reach out to others, to be the light, and to disciple to people. There's certain expectations that are us followers that God has of us.
Yeah. I love that. That's beautiful. Yesterday when we went to church, the pastor, he was talking about becoming teachers. And for me, it's really heavy on me being with Bridles and Bibles and starting all of this stuff, because I know that the expectation that God has for me is higher than, maybe the person sitting next to me, because I have to go out and disciple and teach to people now. And, having that expectation put on yourself, it's like, okay, I need to be here because this is what God expects of me.
Yeah. And it's comparing that relationship, I seek to have, a horse to have the same relationship with me, kind of like the same relationship that I have with God. I want my horses to find comfort in me. I want them to find confidence in me. I want them to not hesitate into looking to me for guidance and leadership when they're confused, when they're fearful or scared, and it's like, the more that I work with horses, the more I realize, this relationship that I'm seeking with this horse is the relationship that I should be seeking with God as well. I want that horse to look to me in the same aspects that I need to look to God. If I'm confused in life and I don't know which direction to go, my first inclination isn't to go turn around and run away because I don't want to cross the creek. It should be, hey, God, what do what's the safest path in this scenario? What do we need to do? How are you going to keep me safe in this situation, and be able to lean and trust on him?
Right. It's so interesting, like, just talking to other people who have that deep understanding of horses and the relationships that they have with Christ. Because have you noticed that, like, your horse kind of reflects your personality and your character?
Yeah, definitely.
That's one area that I always tell people. I'm like, your horse is going to reflect you and your character because they spend so much time with you. And the more time that you spend with Jesus, the more time that you're with him, the more you're going to reflect his character. And you're going out as a representative of him, just as your horse is now a representative of you.
Yes, and I've noticed in my training, the closer that I grow to God, the better my horses get as well, because of that aspect that you're a reflection of Christ.
Yes, yeah, same. I wish that I could have told myself when I was 20 something years old and be like, hey, by the way, you're going to get a lot better at this, but it's going to suck for a little while because you got great. So, as we move into the bridle horse section of this, I do want to ask, how did you discover and start with what came to making bridle horses?
So that all kind of started when I met my husband. I was on the other end of the spectrum when it came to spade bits and stuff like that, because of where I was born and raised. Up here in this area, you only get a bigger bit when you lose control of your horse. So spade bits up here are very far and few between, and anyone that sees one is just, they assume that you're just trying to kill your horse. And when I met my husband, he was talking about it, and I told him my thoughts on it, and he goes, well, actually, and he actually took the time to kind of explain it to me, the process of starting them in the hackamore or snaffle, going into the two rein, and then into the spade, and he explained the mechanics and everything like that. And it piqued my interest, and because nobody ever took the time to really explain it to me before. I started doing some research on it, and once I started doing my research on it and doing deep dives into history and everything like that, I was like, that's it. That's what I want to be. That is my ultimate goal. That is the ultimate horseman right there, is that. And so for the past 8 years of my life, I've just been completely submersed in it, and, trying to gain more knowledge and understanding of it. And it seems like every single time I get to the point where I'm like, yeah, I know a lot. And then something else comes in, like equine biomechanics. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know anything, all over again. And I have to start all over. But it was just, the start was my husband just taking the time to explain to me, and his mindset was, when we first met, I don't care if I change this girl's mind, but I'm going to lay the facts out there for her. And that's what I'm all about. If someone lays the facts out for me, I'm going to research it and be like, all right, let's see what this is all about. And so that's how it all kind of got started. And then we ended up going and cowboying in Eastern Oregon, and being completely submersed in that lifestyle, surrounded by bridle horsemen. I mean, it was one of the best opportunities that I ever had, and it's gave me an extensive amount of knowledge on it too.
So that's really cool that you were in Eastern Oregon and stuff. Where at around here did you work?
So it was mostly kind of in the Burns area. We worked in John Day a little bit. We worked in Burns, French Glen, Riverside, Oregon, which is it's on a dirt road in between Burns and Ventura. And so it was a ranch out that we worked at, and we worked in Seneca as well. So handful of ranches just out kind of in the Burns, John Day area.
Nice. I know that you're a mom, and you and I actually have kids that are close in age now, we learned.
Yes.
How has that changed, your horsemanship and your relationship with Christ?
With my horsemanship, it's definitely taught me to be even more flexible. When Junie was first born and I got the clear to ride, it wasn't, I'm going to get up and go ride today, obviously. And so being able to plan around nap times and things like that, or, other people's schedules to watch her, has changed. I definitely don't have as much time around horses as I would like, but, Junie's definitely my first priority. And, I took on a couple of training horses early on when Junie was 3-4 months old, and just planning on going out and working horses during nap times, and knowing that, if she woke up, maybe I wasn't going to be able to ride that day, I would have to strap her to me to do groundwork, or, being more flexible and stuff like that. It's also made me more, I'd say, more sensitive to animals, for sure. I feel like I got a little more intuition on how a horse feels and their emotions, quote unquote, for that particular moment. As far as my relationship with Christ becoming a mother, it's definitely made me lean on God more so than ever before. Because, I mean, I have the thought all the time. I have no idea how a woman could be a mother without Christ to lean on. You know, it's just, there's been a couple of scary episodes with Junie. She had a brew event when she was 2 months old. I woke up in the middle of the night and she wasn't breathing and she was completely limp and lifeless. I thought she was dead. And it was just a brew. They call it a brief, resolved, unexplained episode, which is extremely vague. And they're like, yeah, sometimes babies just stop breathing for like a minute or two. And I'm like, that's not normal. And after that, it was really hard to lay her down at night. I mean, I don't think I slept for like 2 months. I would get maybe 10, 15 minutes of sleep here and there. And that really taught me to lean on God, that, you know, every night when I lay Junie down to bed, I pray over her that, you know, her life is in God's hands. And what better place to lay your child's life than the creator of the heavens and the earth? There is no safer place. And so without God to be able to lean on, I have no idea how women can get through some things. Like, I've struggled with some postpartum depression, and there was some scary nights. You know, Junie's teething, I haven't had any sleep, I'm sick, she's sick, Jeff works late nights at the mill. And so I feel completely and utterly alone. And being able to turn to God and pray to him to, you know, purify my mind, cleanse my thoughts, you know, because it was, you know, there's moments of ultimate weakness when you're struggling with postpartum depression, and the devil is going to take advantage of your weakness. And that's something that, you know, without God to turn to would be scary. Not being able to lean on God and not being able to rely on him for my safety, for my baby's safety, and knowing that he's got a better plan, that he's got, he's got a bright future lined out for you and your child, really helps tremendously when you're struggling with things like that.
For sure. I know, as like a mom, after you have the kid, for me, my biggest struggle has been trying to convince myself that I'm still cool after having a kid. And, you know, I feel like the Western world treats you a little differently. They kind of put kid gloves on you. Because I worked at a lot, and I've done ranch work, I've built fence, and now, like, even my buddies who are, you know, cowboys and live down the road and stuff, he's like, no, let me do that for you. And I'm like, I'm still the same person, I can still do it.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Yeah.
I don't get to leave the house as much. Like you said, you gotta, like, make a schedule to be able to go ride your horse or work with anything. You take the kid with you, and it's definitely a struggle in these early years where they're little, they're attached to you 24/7, but having Christ to lean on and that identity in him of saying, no, I am still a good person, like I am still good at my job, I am still a cool buckaroo, I can still do these things even if I'm not doing them at the moment. So
That, when I first it started when I was pregnant, because I was a high-risk pregnancy. So when we moved up to North Idaho, nobody let me do anything because I was a high-risk pregnancy. And so going and feeding the horses, and it was just like, I could still feed the horses, guys. Like, it's fine. But not being able to go get hay unless Jeff was there, not being able to buck bales, not being able to get bags of grain, not being able to lift heavy water buckets and stuff like that. The loss of independency for me was a really hard struggle, and that was something that I really had to turn to Christ to for guidance on that. And I'm like, and he just kept having to remind me, like, you know, Sarah, this is important that you take care of yourself, because, you know, you got your little baby to take care of. This isn't about you anymore. This is about Juniper. So there was a lot of times that I had to lean on God and ask to him for guidance and pray to him about that, because I've worked, you know, a full-time job since I was 16 years old. And the last 7 years, I've worked 7 days a week, 6-7 days a week, cowboying, working for the BLM and everything. And to go from that to literally not working at all was such a struggle for me. I'm like, I can't just sit in a chair all day. I don't know. Like, what do I do?
Right? No, definitely. So So my husband bought me my little blue roan. She's like 4 years old. Her name's Big Girl, and she's super awesome. She can't cock bread. She's really, really smart. But after having the kid, I had a C-section, and then I ended up with health problems. It's been about a year and a half now since I've had her, and I'm starting to get my health back. I'm finally losing a lot of the weight that I had, and I'm riding my colt.
Yeah.
But riding colts again for the first time since having the baby is a lot more nerve-wracking than I remember it before I had the kid. And so I've been lost with Jesus and talking to him and being like, hey, I need your help to have my confidence to do this and go ride, because one of my biggest fears is getting hurt and not being here for my kid anymore.
Yeah, that is a real struggle. Like the last place that we lived, the lady that we were working for her in exchange for rent, and I was working with some of her horses, and she had this one mare that had some hormonal issues. You probably saw the TikTok of that mare. She was kicking and squealing, like it was like a minute long just clip of her. Yeah, that was the mare. And the first time I got on that mare, I was just, the only thoughts going through my head were, if I get hurt, who's going to take care of Juniper? And like, it was so hard. And that cult that I started for the equine ministry that I'm a part of, the first couple of rides that I put on him, like my hands were just shaking. And like, I've been nervous to get on colts and stuff like that the first time before, but it was never like I have to throw up before I get on this horse type of nervous. It was always like, you know, this might be a trip to the hospital, but I've been to the hospital hundreds of times before, you know, kind of thing. But now it's like, if I get hurt, you know, I'm Juniper's, you know, life source right now. And what's going to happen to her? You know, who's going to watch her? Who's going to take care of her? You know, and, you know, you know, as you're establishing that bond with your baby and that relationship, especially when she was early on, just getting that strong bond between them. I'm like, at that point in time, I still had issues with my mom watching her for like 3 hours. I'm like, she's gonna die. So I'm like, if I get hurt, Junie's gonna die. That was my thought in my head, is if I get hurt, Junie will die. And so it's really hard, and building your confidence back up after having a kid, because you automatically have those thoughts. I used to be able to just get in the car and drive anywhere without a seatbelt. You know, cowboy life. You hardly ever wear a seatbelt. I couldn't drive from our house to the gas station, which was 2 minutes away. I'd get in and start to pull out the driveway, and I'd get anxiety in my chest, and I'd have to put that seatbelt on, because I'm like, if I get in a wreck,
right,
you know, I have to think of Juniper. It's not just about me anymore.
My husband teases me of how slow I drive. I drive my little car like I'm driving a truck and trailer with 20 horses in it.
Yeah. Yeah, my husband makes fun of me now because we got snow and I'm driving like 20 miles an hour. He's like, Sarah, the roads are clear. I'm like, there could be black ice. He's like, you drove faster with a trailer load of wild Mustangs in the back. I'm like, but this is our baby.
Don't understand, okay? It's a small child.
Yeah.
I must keep the child safe.
Yes.
Yeah. So our next question, what does being a horseman mean to you? Obviously, like, we're horsewomen, but I always just say horsemen because horsewomen just seems too long in my vocabulary.
Yeah. That's kind of like the cowgirl, cowboy thing. Like, yeah.
The cowgirl. I don't know why, but it the pink boots.
Well, it's just, yeah, everybody assumes when you say, like, especially up here, you go, hey, oh, yeah, I cowgirled. And they're like, oh, you barrel race? No. Yeah, I did not barrel race. Yep. I cowboyed.
Yeah.
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 But being a horseman to me means putting the horse first before everything that you do. And like, I feel like the word horseman, like a lot of people just simplify it a lot. Like being able to ride a horse makes you a horseman. You know, just like somebody puts a cowboy hat on and rides the pony at the fair. They're like, I was a cowboy today, you know. But there's so much more to it than just being able to ride a horse, you know. When it comes to so being a horseman it's so much more than just being able to ride a horse. Working on ranches really taught me a lot more about utilizing horses as a tool. And a lot of people get mad at you when you say, yeah, a horse is a tool. And they're like, no, they're a pet, they're a soulmate, they're a heart horse. But if you think about it, any good tradesman treats their tools in the best condition that they possibly could ever do. You know, they're not going to leave their nice tool set out in the rain. You know, they're going to make sure that it's organized, put back in the box, and put in the shop in its place. They take care of their tools. And it's the same thing when it comes to horses. You know, you have to take care of them, because if you're going to have a horse for, 10, 15, 20 years to work on a ranch, you have to take care of them to last that long. You can't run them down into the dirt and expect them to live, be able to be ridden past 10 years old. And one thing, like, up here that I've been kind of debating, like, since we're back in this area and we haven't really been using our horses for much, I thought about kind of getting into the show industry a little bit, kind of like ranch horse versatility and stuff like that, just because that's what's up here in this area. But I'm kind of on the fence about it, because there are so many things within the show industry where people will take, the opinions of a judge or seconds on a timer, and they prioritize those above the needs and expectations of their horses. And that's why you see horses breaking down in the show industry so quickly and so fast. And that's one thing that I tell people when I'm doing clinics, if they want to show and stuff like that. I tell them that to be a true horseman means to put your horse first. So if you find yourself sacrificing fundamental ethics of horsemanship to appease a judge, or to take shortcuts in your training just so a horse can get into the arena, or taking a horse out and doing something before it's ready, then you're not being a horseman. You're sacrificing things to appease somebody else, but you really should be putting that horse first and foremost, and doing what is best for them before you go and try to, show them off to someone. Show off what your horse is and not take shortcuts and stuff like that. I think that's really important, and that's what being a horseman is.
I've struggled in the horse industry just because of that aspect, is people prioritize like winning money, or winning a ribbon or a prize or something over the care of their horse. And for me, I think that if you want to do really, really good in the industry, even if you're showing, if you're rodeoing, whatever, if you prioritize your horse first, and no matter what area you go into, it doesn't matter if you're show jumping, if you're barrel racing, if you're showing, if you prioritize the horse and the relationship that you have with that horse first, then they're going to do so much better in whatever it is you're going and competing. And so for me, like, I've struggled with the industry just because a lot of times you just see people out trying to make a bunch of money, and you can see horses suffering in that. And I've struggled with the same thing. Like, I would like to start showing because I think that it would be fun and I would enjoy it, but I refuse to sacrifice the well-being or health of my horse in order to do so.
Yeah. And like, for example, when we were down in Eastern Oregon, when we were in French Glen, Jeff and I got a connection with a neighbor, and we were going to start team roping with them just for fun. They had an arena and stuff like that. And I was like, hey, more opportunity to rope for me. Heck yeah. After the handful of times that we did it, I started noticing that Reba would start, every time I got on her, we went into an arena. She still has kind of issues with arenas now, going into the arena. She gets real tight and anxious. And because I didn't have the knowledge and expertise when it comes to training a team roping horse and how to make a well-rounded one, I decided, I'm not going to team rope on Reba. She was really good at it. She's fast, she's quick, she can track a cow, and we did really well at it when we were doing it, and she had a lot of potential. But because I didn't have the knowledge and expertise to do that, I decided that I wasn't going to do that on her, because it was causing a lot of stress and anxiety in her every time we entered an arena because of it. And so since we didn't have an arena where we lived, it's not like I could take her out and work her in the arena and get her relaxed again in the arena. Every time we went into arena, it was for like a, team, ranch rodeo or team roping or something. And it was always high-speed events. And so I decided, I'm not going to do those things on her anymore, because it was becoming a mental block for her. And even though she has a lot of potential to do it, I just knew it was something that I didn't want to ruin a good horse because I wanted the rope more.
Right. Yeah. So, have you always been a Christ follower? Have you always been a Christian, or?
I was born and raised Christian. My dad was, an elder and a deacon at the church and all of that stuff. Born and raised going to Christian camp and everything. I did have a time after my dad had passed away. My dad was really kind of my ground in my life, and I didn't realize how much I relied on dad for my relationship with Christ, which was wrong of me at the time. And so when he passed away, I kind of fell away from Christ, and I made some pretty big mistakes. I got involved in like a party crowd and did some bad things and stuff like that. And then when just before I met my husband, I actually turned back to Christ, and that's when I realized, I don't have to rely on somebody else for my relationship with Christ, because it's a personal relationship. And so it's something that, the past 9 years I've come back into and been developing and strengthening it since. I was at a really low point in my life that I turned back to Christ and said, I'm going to rededicate my life to you and stuff like that. And I told him that I'm going to stop dating every guy that's interested in me and hoping that they want to marry me someday. And I was going to wait for God to provide a guy for me. And then a few months later, I met Jeff. And it seemed like him and I kind of went through the same thing on the dating aspect and all of that. And we both turned to God and said, hey, when the time is right, I'm going to focus on being, instead of thinking that wanting to be a wife, I'm going to focus on being the wife that you call me to be. And after I started working on that, that's when Jeff and I had met. And 9 months later, we were married. And then ever since then, my relationship with Christ has just been growing stronger and stronger. There's times, here and there where I fall away a little bit out of pure stubbornness, as I mentioned earlier, or, independence. But it's always a good lesson for me to turn back to Christ and lean on him. It's a way of him showing me, you can't do this alone. You can't rely on just yourself. You have to rely on me.
So when did your relationship with Christ and horsemanship start to overlap for you?
I would say it kind of started when I was young, but it really didn't actually connect until recent years, I would say, because when I was a kid, one of my favorite times, favorite memories riding horses is with a friend of mine. We'd ride bareback and we'd just take off at a dead run through the hayfields and throw our hands up in the air and sing praises to God. And those are some of my fondest memories riding. I wouldn't say that really truly connected it until recent years, when I actually started truly training horses versus, thinking I was training horses. And kind of circling back onto what I said earlier about, God utilizing horses to speak to me, and, finding the connections of my relationship with my horses that I'm working with as a comparison of my relationship with God. And so it wasn't until recent years that it's really connected and intertwined to where every time that I'm out riding or working with horses that, I'm thinking about God. Either I'm praying to God, talking to God, whether I'm listening, seeing what he's trying to teach me for that day, or even just riding and thinking, look at all of God's marvelous creation. Horses are, I think, some of his most magnificent creations. And, what an honor it is that God has, given me this passion, and, he can utilize this passion to connect and speak with me.
I love that. So now that, you've done your whole social media thing and you've gotten pretty popular with it, and you've been spreading so much great knowledge about bridle bits and stuff, what does the future look like for you with God and horsemanship and moving forward with that?
We all know it's in God's hands. Where God wants me, he's going to put me. And I've come to realize that over the past, I would say, 4 years, God is starting to open doors for me that I never actually dreamed possible for me, because I am not actually a very good people person. I get along with horses and I get along with livestock. I'd rather deal with horses and livestock all day long than I deal with people. And so because of that, I always wanted to be, a trainer. I wanted to train horses for a living. But every single time for the past 15 years, it seems like every time I see an opening, I'm like, this is my, I'm going to be here and I'm going to start training horses for a living. And then that door shuts. And I'm like, on to the next ranch. I'm like, this is the place I'm going to train horses for a living. That door shuts. This ranch is like, no, you're not training horses here. And it's just like, it was just door after door closed. And I'm just like, finally I was like, okay, if I can't train horses, I'll do clinics. Because from a business standpoint, I started thinking of it from a business standpoint. I can make $1,000 for 30 days on a horse, or I can make $1,000 for 2 days for a clinic. From a business standpoint, that made sense. And so I decided, I'm like, I'm going to do a handful of clinics a year to make some extra cash. And the first couple of clinics I did, I was like, this isn't really my cup of tea, because I had so many expectations for these clinics. And it just, I expected to talk about spade bits and bridle horses and advanced horse work, and we're teaching someone how to do a haunch turn, if that, it's like, and it was so frustrating. So I ended up praying to God and asking a couple of people that I know, how, I talked to Carson James about it. I'm like, how do you do these clinics? How? And I talked to Mark Jenkins about it, because he does a lot of clinics and stuff like that. I'm like, how do you not get frustrated with just teaching the basics all the time? And there's people that don't want to listen. There's people that show up just to ride their horse in front of people. There's people that get offended when you don't sit there and tell them, oh my God, you're doing amazing the whole time. It's just so frustrating. And Carson told me, you got to focus. If you have 20 people in the arena for a clinic and you got one person there, you got to draw your fire from that one person, Be there for that one person. Draw your, knowing that the next clinic you might have two, kind of thing. And he's like, and that makes your day. And I'm like, okay, focus on the little things. And then I talked to Mark, and Mark had the mindset of, he's the same way. He's not a people person either. But his mindset is, Sarah, you could train one horse for 30, 60, 90 days and send it back to the owner and not deal with the owner at all. But how much have you actually helped that horse if you haven't helped the person? And I was like, oh, that makes sense. And he goes, well, if you do a clinic too, not only do you got 10, 20 horses there that you can help in that time, but since you're helping the people, you're helping that horse every day in the future, and you're helping every horse that person comes into contact with in the future. And so them showing me their mindsets on that really helped. And then God really unveiled this passion for teaching and education in me that I did not know was there. And he started to open doors for clinics for me that I never even dreamed possible. And it seemed like once I took that turn, I don't know how long you've been following me on TikTok, but my TikTok videos in the past, when I did video replies to people, were very snarky and they're rude, and I'm not proud of them, but I leave them there to show people how much I've grown.
Right.
I want to be an example. And that kind of changed too when a TikTok follower reached out to me and said that her daughter had been following me for a long time. And I met her daughter, and I'm like, I am not a good example for her. Your little girl should not be looking up to me for my TikTok video replies at this point in time. And so my whole kind of the way that I approach people when it comes to, even if they give me a snarky comment or make a personal jab or something like that, I realize that if you're going to be a jerk back to people, they're not receptive into the information that you're going to give them. And God has shown me that you need to be kind. You need to be considerate. You need to, show them what the truth is, what the facts is. And then after that, it is up to them. Just as us as followers, when we disciple to someone, we can show somebody the light of Christ, and we could show them his love and his forgiveness and everything like that. But ultimately, it's up to them whether or not they decide to accept Jesus into their heart. And it's the same thing when it comes, that's kind of the same mindset that I have when it comes to teaching people. I can give them the facts, I can give them the information, and I can present that to them in a kind, considerate manner. And then it's going to be up to them to pick it up from there. And that's why I've really started focusing on clinics versus training horses, because I have a bigger opportunity to make a difference and make a change and be a impact in the horse industry versus just taking a horse and saying, I'll see you in 30, 60, 90 days. Don't talk to me. It's going to make a bigger impact. And so I think God has definitely started to open doors. I know, because this year God has opened some pretty just amazing doors for me this year. Coming up in May, I'm going to be doing a clinic with Mark Jenkins, and it's going to be recorded. He has a production team coming out, and it's going to end up on RFD TV, the Cowboy Channel, and Better Horses. And that's something that I never thought that my opinions and my views of horsemanship would ever be something worth being on national television. And so that's something that I'm like, that is all glory to God. That is a door that God has opened for me. That's something that I never dreamed possible when it comes to me, that my thoughts and my actions when it comes to horses were going to be something worthy of national television, that it would be something that other people, would be that interested in, that they seek value in my input. And it's just been mind-blowing to me, because I've always seen myself as just another horse girl with an opinion. And so because of my relationship with Christ and following him and his lead on the doors that he's opening for me, he's utilizing my passion, maybe not in a way that I thought it was going to be, but he's doing even greater things with it that are going to be even more beneficial for the horse industry, that I can actually make an impact in the horse industry because of it, because of my relationship with Christ. And all the doors that are opening and all these things that are going to be happening for the next couple of years in terms of doing clinics and stuff, that is all glory to God, because those are doors that he has opened for me. And it's just absolutely mind-blowing to me that these things are actually things that are going to be possible and that are actually going to happen. It's not something, oh, that would be cool if that happened one day. It's like, this is in motion. It's happening. It's, and it's all because of God. God has placed certain people in my lives that value my input, and these people are people that are, they're good connections to have in the horse industry, because they have, connections with RFD TV and the Cowboy Channel, because, they're really good, well-known trainers already, and they're people that I could seek advice from, that I can talk to. And it's just, he's brought together this amazing community of horsemen, and he's, I've formulated relationships and friendships with these people because God has brought them into my life, because, he wants to utilize my passion in a way that, is in the glory of God. And everything that I do, every clinic that I do, I pray beforehand, and I pray during lunch break, and I tell God, this is all glory to you. It's pretty amazing to me, the opportunities that he has brought to me because of that.
That's really cool. I'm really excited for you to be able to do that. And I love being able to watch not just another person, but another woman in the horse industry who's a mother. And, it's interesting seeing somebody so much like myself going out and being so successful in the horse world. I think it's amazing.
It's been a trip for me, for sure, with these things, because, one of the biggest doubts that I've had in terms of the horse industry, because I've always wanted to be, fairly well known. Not, I didn't expect, but one of the biggest doubts that I've had, as becoming, starting to go into the clinician world or becoming a trainer and stuff like that is the fact of being a woman. You look at the horse industry in any aspect really of the horse industry, well-known women trainers, competitors and stuff like that. They're kind of few and far between. If you ask people, who's your top 5 trainers, I guarantee you 90% of people are going to name 5 guys. And there's nothing wrong with that at all,
Right.
but it's also been something that has been scary for me, like stepping out as a woman in aspects of like that when it comes to the horse industry.
I love that you are just so out there and as a woman and a mom and really making your way in this industry and having God guide you every single step of the way. That's so amazing to see, and I'm sure really encouraging to all of the ranch wives out there who are going through the same thing and watching somebody be successful and stuff. That's amazing.
I sure hope that, that I can be a little, at least a little bit of an inspiration or an encourager for, other women alike and stuff like that. Because being a mom is not easy. I'm learning that for sure. But yeah, I hope that I could be a little bit of an encouragement to other moms out there in the horse industry and stuff like that and ranching. I mean, we're not in ranching right now. We're not ranching. I hope that being transparent about my life and transparent about the things that I do is an encouragement to others. I mean, at the very least, I really hope that it is, an inspiration a little bit to other people, because it is really hard to be a mom, and especially with your first kid and you're trying to figure it out along the way. You're like, this is my first time, but it's their first time. What do we do? and I definitely don't have it all figured out. I have a really good circle of friends here that I was kind of born and raised with up in this area that are Christian women as well. And so it's really good to have, be able to talk to them. They've, had kids before me, or they have multiple kids already. And so it's really nice to be able to confide in other Christian women and when you're having struggles and stuff like that. But being transparent with my life and how it's kind of going and stuff like that is really important to me, because I don't want to put on a front on who I am. I did go through a phase when my husband and I first started cowboying, like trying to make myself look as handy as possible to look cool. And then after a few years, I was just like, I don't have to make myself look handy. I used to sit there and talk like I was the best roper in the pen, but I only know 2 shots, and if I could catch 10 times during a branding, I'm happy. The reality is I'm not a very good roper. Andy Harmon takes amazing pictures and makes me look really good, but I'm not as good. And just, I feel like that's something God has shown me as well, is being transparent on who I really am, because I don't want a false me to be an inspiration to somebody. I want who I really am to be an inspiration.
I think that's beautiful. Right. I love that. One of the things that I've done with Bridles and Bibles is I've actually written a book, and in that book there's a second section in there that talks about the structure of building like this house as your identity, and going through the steps of having a relationship with the Lord and building the relationship with yourself. And I love that you talk about vulnerability, because the last part in there, it talks about putting in windows in your house so everybody can see who we are, and being vulnerable with the world. Even though being vulnerable can be really, really hard, because we've all been burned by somebody or something at some point in time. And having that ability for people to look in through those windows and see who you truly are. So putting yourself out there, it's so difficult, because obviously, like, you're going to get, I'm sure you get thousands of comments and stuff like, oh, spade bits are bad and you're harming your horse and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And that's not true, but to be able to still put yourself out there like that.
I think that's really, like, one of the struggles with the Western industry, especially when it comes to cowboying and like certain trades and stuff like that. There's a lot of things people say, oh, well, cowboying's dying. And I'm like, well, that's because well, part of it is, some people aren't willing to work and things like that, but there's a lot of people out there who really aren't willing to teach it because they just don't have the time. I don't have the time and stuff like that. And there's a lot of times that I'll make a post about a spade bit or something, and I'll post it in a Facebook group or I'll post it on my horsemanship page. And I almost always get a comment of someone saying, wow, you're brave to post this on social media. And my response is how are people going to learn? Like, yeah, there's always going to be people who you're never going to change their mind.
Right.
But, and one of the things my husband gets mad at about all the time, he's like, you get in these Facebook debates, in the comment section with someone, he's like, you're never going to change their mind. And I'm like, well, I know I'm not going to change that person's mind, but what about someone who has kind of the same thought, but is also open-minded, goes to that comment thread and reads all of the facts and information that I read out, and then they decide, hey, well, maybe I'm going to look into this. What if somebody goes through that comments thread and has, they have the same thought that bit is evil or it looks extremely harsh, but they have a more open mindset? Just as Jeff took time to just lay out the facts and information for me, he changed my mindset on it. So how many people are going to read that comment thread and they're going to change their minds? And so it's all about being open and transparent and laying the facts and information out there, And a lot of the times when I do reply to comments on my TikTok or on my Facebook or whatever, I generally choose the person that is the most snarky. I know that they're going to actually debate it. Yeah. And that gives me more opportunities every time they comment back saying, well, what about this? That's another opportunity for me to lay out some facts and information. And there's a lot of people out there that go, I just don't have, I don't have the patience or I don't have the time. I'm like, somebody has to. Because if we do not, and this is how the horse industry has gotten to the point where people think spade bits are evil, is because no one took the time to try to educate the ones that look at it and fear for the worst. Right. They just said, I'm not going to pay attention to that person. And that's how it ended up the way that it is. If no one takes the time to educate and no one takes the time to explain, then nobody's going to get educated. Right. Nobody's going to learn.
Well, I think that's probably all we've got for today.
Seems.
All right, so let's go ahead and pray.
All right.
Dear Jesus, we just want to come to you today and just thank you so much for Sara Jean here and the work that she's doing through you and helping the horse industry and just growing and changing the mindsets of other people and teaching about you, God. We really thank you for letting her come be with us today and just talk about you and talk about horses and the great gifts in them that you've given us. And God, we love you and we appreciate you and we thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. This is Bridles and Bibles podcast. This has been Sara Jean. Thank you so much for coming on with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I really had a good time despite the technical issues.
Thank you. All right. We'll see you guys later. Thank you so much.
Thank you.